And we are watching an Austin, Texas courthouse where a verdict has been reached for punitive damages in the Sandy Hook family's defamation case against Alex Jones. We will bring you that verdict as soon as we have it. But first, the story we mentioned earlier, FBI Director Christopher Wray confirming the agency punted hundreds of tips back to the White House during its investigation into allegations against then Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. Here's some of that testimony yesterday.
Is it true that after Kavanaugh-related tips were separated from regular tip line traffic, they were forwarded to White House counsel without investigation?
When the hundreds of calls started coming in, we gathered those up, reviewed them, and provided them to the White House.
Without investigation?
We reviewed them and then provided them to the White House.
You reviewed them for purposes of separating from tip line traffic, but did not further investigate the ones that related to Kavanaugh, correct?
Correct.
Wray went even further, admitting the FBI also took direction from the White House as to which calls the agency should look into. This comes after an admission last year by the assistant FBI director that the tip line received more than 4,500 tips after repeated failed attempts by senators to get a thorough explanation of the agency's investigation. Joining us now, MSNBC national security analyst Frank Figliuzzi, former FBI Assistant Director for Counterintelligence, and Olivia Troy is here. Welcome back. Frank, what's happening? You got the Assistant FBI Director saying the FBI provided the White House with all relevant tips of over 4,500 tips? Is this FBI failure or another Trump failure within our government and our institutions?
So look, I'm sorry if I sound weary of explaining this, but I've been explaining this since the Kavanaugh nomination. I've written about it, spoke about it. It's not new information. The rules of the road right now, and that have existed for decades under numerous administrations, do something really bizarre, Michael. There's only one kind of investigation the FBI does, only one, where the American people are not their client. And that kind of investigation is a reinvestigation of a White House appointee. In the case of a reinvestigation of a White House appointee, the White House calls the shots, and the parameters are set by the White House on what they can and can't do in the FBI to reinvestigate an appointee. Kavanaugh was a reinvestigation because, as you know, he had been a federal judge at the district level, had a background, at the appellate court level, had a background. So this was a reinvestigation. If people don't like how this works, they should demand, and Senator Whitehouse, who's been extremely vocal on this, who knows the rules inside and out, I can tell you that from personal experience, he knows. He's feigning indignation here. He should be demanding the White House to change the rules about how the White House and future White Houses should interact with the FBI on an appointee reinvestigation. If you don't like it, change it. But there's a lot of people out there saying the FBI should have just plowed forward and ignored the rules. I don't think we want an FBI who ignores the rules. I think we want a White House that demands resolution of 4,500 tips. That's what I think we should be demanding. The other thing we need to be looking at and focused on is, since Kavanaugh was a district court judge and an appellate court judge and had backgrounds for those positions, how come in those backgrounds under previous FBI directors and previous administrations, how come they didn't turn up this information? That's a valid question.
It is, and I think it's a little bit confusing because people, to your first point, believe that whenever these nominees come up, the FBI is going to do a background check. They're going to look into them regardless of how many times they've been before the committee. So you make a very important point there. So, Olivia, Trump apparently had the power here to do more. So it's not a great look after a rushed appointee who had a lot of unanswered questions, to Frank's point, that should have been vetted before. What do you make of this? How do you think this reads to the American people right now?
Honestly, the first thing that came to my mind was the mob mentality, right? So now he has a sitting justice there that's basically there because he did him a favor. And they likely didn't follow up through on these. I'm sure they didn't. It also speaks to, a lot of these tips came from women, is my understanding. And I think we're pretty clear on how Donald Trump views women and their worth. And so I think, honestly, those are the first things that came to mind at the time, was the sort of, the lack of care of integrity of someone that will be sitting on the Supreme Court, a body that should be held with integrity, and the lack of follow through on really looking into this and deciding to go ahead with his nomination, fully knowing that there were all these concerns that were being reported, apparently. And, outside of the investigation, like Frank said, I mean, one would think that a president of the United States would take a pause on that and say, well, maybe this is not the right person to put forward for the bench. And maybe other Republican officials and elected officials would maybe stop and think the same thing. But that is not, unfortunately, the integrity of what we're seeing here with many of these people on the Republican side of the House, and especially something that pretty much did not exist in the Trump administration.
So, Frank, Director Wray also told senators that the Supreme Court's abortion decision has sparked a general intensification of violence across the issue, and they've opened up a number of investigations. So what's your reaction to that, and how much worse do you think this is going to get for us?
There have previously been DHS warnings that included this amongst the concerns of threats coming up. So the reason that was prompted, that warning, was domestic extremist chat rooms, blogs are indeed talking about the potential of a soft target represented in abortion demonstrations. They're talking about hurting people, and they view that. In fact, even following the Buffalo shooting, Michael, there was talk online from people saying, supermarket, not such a great target. Why didn't he just hit a pro-choice rally? Would have been a much smarter target. So that's where we are right now in this divided society. Law enforcement has got to step up, develop the intelligence, do proactive measures. But the domestic extremist threat, Michael, is more real than ever. And now yet another vulnerability has developed with regard to the abortion issue.
Yeah, it is a dynamic space right now, Frank, as you mentioned. Thank you, Frank Figliuzzi and Olivia Troy. Thank you very much. Up next, a powerful message from the WNBA over Brittany Griner's 9.5-year sentence in Russia.